Welcome to the Xander Speaks podcast, where guests share their failures instead of their success to inspire you to go out and fail. All right, Xander listeners, we are here today with a special guest, Mr. Jim Markel of Red Oxx, and that's Red Oxx with how many D's and how many X's?
1D, 2 X's.
1D, 2 X's. And so you do something that I think is super fantastic for not only the community, but you make probably one of the highest quality products I've ever seen. If those of you aren't familiar with Jim or Red Oxx makes all kinds of bags and accessories essentially from high quality material right here in Billings, Montana. And so I'll let you talk a little bit more about those products because I have a Red Oxx bag, but I can't describe it. It's, it's beautiful.
It's quite simple. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
It's basically military spec for the civilian market.
Okay.
My background in the military, my family's background, and my business partner, we're all parachute riggers. And so we source domestically, and we build it here, and for the most part sell it all over the country and the United States, Canada, and ship out to Australia, New Zealand.
So you say parachute riggers.
Yes.
Was that something you did prior?
Right. I was in the Marine Corps and Marine Corps reconnaissance.
Okay.
My father was as well. My business partner was a Navy parachute rigger. We worked on aircraft carriers.
There was a vet event yesterday that I went to down at the Veterans Navigation Network office, and they had just a ton of people there. And there was this friend of mine who owns a local screen printing business, and he said he finally got his garage insulated. And so a friend of his insulated his garage with spray foam, but as he did it, he put crayons in the wall so that he could have a snack. And I was like, that's ridiculous, but I love it.
That's a Marine Corps thing.
That's a Marine Corps thing. And so he was like, I never heard of that till I got in. And I was like, well, I was in the Air Force. We talked about it a little bit.
Right.
So cool. So obviously you started with rigging. How did the transition go to making Red Oxx bags?
Well, originally Red Oxx was founded as a fitness company. So we started making soft accessories for the gym, tricep straps, leg straps, weight belts, that kind of put around your waist and all that. So everything's soft goods in that regard.
That's kind of crazy because that's a bit of a departure from where you're at.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you decided to go from manufacturing that stuff into Red Oxx bags. Do you remember the first bag you made?
Well, actually, the first bag I made was probably in junior high school. My father was a rigger, so I was going to the gym and needed a gym bag, and he took me down to the Paraloft, and this is at Camp Lejeune.
Yeah, okay.
And he mostly made it. I think I cut it out, and but he designed it and cut it out, and I watched him actually build something out of materials off a table, right?
Yeah.
So you take a pile of stuff and make it into something, and that's something I've always liked doing. Ever since I was, really young, I would take all my toys apart and put them back together, and that's kind of led to.
You were just a tinkerer,
right?
It's
a
just
maker.
in your blood, yeah. That's awesome. So we're obviously not here to talk about how successful Red Oxx is, because as far as I understand it, it is a success. Is it a success in your eyes, though?
Never.
That's what a lot of people say that. They're like, hey, I think it could be successful or it's on its way to success.
Right.
But they don't think it's there. And I think that's the hallmark of folks who do well, is they continuously want to either revamp or improve.
Yeah, business is a running fight.
Yeah.
If you've heard it compared to business is a competition or it's a battle.
Yeah.
So you're never resting really per se. Maybe you go out and push your business and then you reevaluate and you come back in and start again. Right. And sometimes the new word is pivot. You got
to be fluid. Yeah.
They have to survive. Yeah. Let's just call it what a pivot is. It's survival.
And so obviously you pivoted away from a business that you didn't think was successful, or maybe it wasn't successful. Talk about that first failure.
So as a company that you're founded, made in America, this is in the 80s, and after I got out of the Marine Corps, we we were selling B2B. That was kind of the model back then, right? You built a product as a manufacturer, and then you sold it to a distributor or directly to another brand, white labeling stuff, or you created your own brand, let's say, and sold it to stores who then sold it to the general public.
Yeah.
And so that was the model. I would, lure these contracts in, and like I had some big names back in the day. I had Joe Weider, I had Norditrack, Parabody out of Minnesota, Gold's Gym. I can't recall them all. There was quite a few brands.
And I would say Nordic Track, Gold's Gym, those are two brands that our listeners are probably familiar with.
Right.
They're still around and still doing ton.
Yep.
Yeah.
So back in those days, we'd get the contract and we would make stuff and build it and put it on a pallet. And about every Friday, the truck would come. We'd load it onto the truck and say, great week, And so I had relationships with the buyers, so these were like wholesale relationships that you kind of cultivate. About 220 stores sold our stuff in the United States and Canada.
Holy cow.
And I was on my way. I'm like, all right, things are great. And then as the 90s progressed, next thing you know, you start hearing about this little country called China. China. Yeah. So one by one.
So did you manufacture the balloon that went up?
Yeah.
Did you rig that?
Well, I joked that they came over to spy on us again. See what we're up to.
So China appears.
China, appears on the marketplace in the 90s, and it starts coming on strong. This is about the time that NAFTA took place.
The North American Free Trade Agreement.
Right. And everybody,
acronyms.
Everybody remembers Ross Perot. Remember that sound of your job?
Ross Perot. Yeah.
That sucking sound.
I just remember him from like SNL. Like,
yeah.
I don't know who did him, but I think it was like maybe like Dana Carvey or something.
Oh, yeah.
Did a great Ross Perot impression.
Yeah. Outstanding. And, it's very prophetic. Everybody said that these jobs, these, blue collar jobs of being a maker weren't necessary in America. We were all going to flip burgers and do software.
Yeah.
And so one by one, I kept getting picked off for my contracts. I would have the buyer would call me up and said, well, somebody with an MBA has decided that we're going to take this stuff to China. And
you mean like outsource the manufacturing?
Yes.
Okay. Wow.
Well, they were outsourcing to me in America.
Yeah.
And so I would try everything I could possibly do to keep the business, right? So I would value engineer, I would streamline my process, and the more I worked at it, the more I leaned my manufacturing out. One day I came down to it, and if you've ever heard of the bill of materials, that's the basics that go into a product.
Yeah, okay.
So you've got, say, a D-ring, 15 inches of webbing, 6 inches of Velcro, thread, a label, and you've got a leg strap, maybe some padding.
Yeah, what you need to assemble that.
Correct.
Yeah.
I could not buy the raw materials for what they were selling it for in the United States from China.
Which is insane because you have to have, and this is just obviously product knowledge for people who don't know, you have to have your cost and then some kind of margin and then their cost. That's just how business works. That's how capitalism works. But if you were not able to produce it for what they think it costs, there's no money to be made there, right?
Right. I could not only not produce it, I couldn't buy, I couldn't put the gas in the tank kind of, that's, and then I learned the things about currency valuation. I don't know if you ever heard of that little term, nasty term.
Yeah.
And so, as our friends in China basically kind of destroyed the U.S. manufacturing economy, I was kind of at a loss. I gained a contract, lose two. And I was like, okay, so I'll create my own brand more. And so I concentrated a little more on selling my brand directly to the 200 stores that carried our product.
Yeah.
And one by one, it's insidious. They knock off your products, they copy them exactly. It got to the point, this is back before the internet even existed in a way that it does now. They could copy a product. They would, back with a fax machine, they'd be at the trade show. They would take a picture with the digital cameras, because cell phones didn't have cameras. They didn't even have cell phones.
Yeah, at that point. I had a flip phone growing up.
Right.
18
so,
on.
Take a picture of your product, fax it to China, put somebody on an airplane, and bring back a prototype, and you'd be knocked off. That during a 4-day show.
Wow.
That's how aggressive. And so I watched as that industry, it was a multi-billion-dollar industry, the fitness industry. All the machines, basically everything was offshore to China. And pretty soon, when the last convention I went to, there was basically people from China sitting in the aisles as the vendors on the vendor side, smoking cigarettes at the fitness thing, sitting there like that, smoking, and, best price, and it's just like, wow, So as the industry collapsed for U.S. manufacturers, I was left with the decision of like, what are we going to do? So I got a call from my last big customer, which was Nordic Track. And even they, because they were like made in America, made in Chaska, Minnesota.
Chaska, Minnesota. I don't know what that is. I think most listeners probably would not know where that is.
It's like near the Twin Cities.
Yeah, for those who are listening from Chaska, Minnesota, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was a big deal. I flew out there, and made the presentation like and there was all the other sales guys sitting out there, and in the lobby, and I went in there and met with the buyer, so it was quite like a little city over there, all these warehouses and value added work. They made everything. They were kind of like 3M, if you're familiar with 3M at all.
Oh yeah. Yeah. They make all kind of, not just like adhesive stuff. They make all kinds of like safety stuff. And just the gamut.
Right. And they make it here.
Yeah.
And I hope they still do. Anyway, so, as I lost that contract, I got the heads up from the buyer. We'd become good friends, and she's like, look, it's not my decision. It's been made by the higher ups.
Damn.
So I cleared out my warehouse, sold everything I had to them. And then I was like, okay, I need to do a brochure. And that was the pivot to luggage and bags. But in the meantime, had opened up a store downtown on North 13th.
Yeah.
That was kind of our first foray, because I had been doing some hunting and fishing shows in the region, as far away as South Dakota.
Oh, that's a hell of a drive.
Yeah, I'd go over to Bismarck. I'd go over to
6 hours, 7 hours.
Yeah, and then I did the Montana Outdoor Recreation Exposition as well. That was kind of our big.
That's not a thing anymore, is it?
No, but it was back in the day. Like 20-something thousand people would go through there. And
I think they moved like the big trade show outdoor retailer to like Denver or Salt Lake, one of the two. It's like every year. They have like two. They have like a winter and then like a spring version of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So we would sell directly to the public there, and people would come into our store, and slowly but surely I kept reinvesting in brochures. This is back before the internet.
Yeah.
And I put a retail store in, and then like the local here people in Billings were coming into the shop, and I knew I had something when I started.
So this was your pivot to the early days of Red Oxx.
Right.
Okay. And you were, at this point, you're making bags, or you have products. What kind of products did you have?
We had rifle cases. We had fishing rod cases, which we've pivoted away from again.
Were they hard-sided stuff?
Soft-sided.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And in basic parachute-style kit bags, the real simple zipper down the middle, aviator kit bags that we all get in the service.
That's what I got one of those for Christmas. Just a plain black bag, because I have a bunch of stuff in the back of my truck that kind of just rolls around, and I was like, no, I got to get a bag. And thank God for Christmas, my wife bought me this gorgeous Red Oxx bag, and I was like, this is perfect.
That's our first products. That's like the first one we learned how to make in rigger school, the little one.
Yeah, that's awesome.
They teach you how to design it, cut it, sew it. Yeah.
Cool. So the fitness aspect of your initial journey ended, it failed, and kind of without your input, you didn't cause it to fail necessarily. This was outside forces,
right?
Stuff you couldn't control,
like the pandemic.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. We can get into that. That's a whole other show.
Yeah, we could go on about that. I tell you, that's the hardest 2 years of my life.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was one of those things where you have to look for a way forward, right? So it was like, okay, we can't continue to doing this. And I'm an outdoorsman, and so it's like, okay, I like doing these things. Why not do something I really love to do? Like whether it was the fishing gear, the rifle gear, or the luggage, the different bags and things like that. And some of it came about from need. Like I'd be hauling some groceries home and drop them all down the stairs at the house. I'm like, oh, I'll go make a little tote bag, and
just to bring them in.
We still make them.
Yeah,
and so it was a hard lesson to learn, because it was like, as hard as I tried to make that work and create a brand that could exist within the specialty retailer market, right? The 200, not the big five sporting goods. We're talking stores like Universal Athletics here in town, like the privately owned, locally owned businesses. It just wouldn't work. They don't have the volume.
Your product is fairly niche. Like if you look at other bags that are just.
Well, this is in the fitness industry.
The fitness industry. Okay,
the fitness industry, yeah. So finding, the right specialty stores to sell our stuff. I spent a lot of time like doing direct sales, going to conventions.
That's right, because you sold B2B.
Right.
Initially.
Trying to build that brand, because that's how you send out a huge box full of stuff. It was just not, even they were getting crushed by the big box retailers.
Yeah.
And so it's like, not only was I getting, outdone by China for nothing, your small specialty retailers are getting crushed by the Costco's of the world.
Well, yeah, and I think this is the time frame where, a lot of those small mom and pop shops ended up going away because of those big box retailers.
Correct.
And it's funny because I think we're seeing a revitalization of those mom and pop stores because they're tired of the product quality just kind of being shit.
I think America is waking up to it. They're finally saying like, if money's tight and things are expensive, I might as well buy something good.
Exactly. You look at I think a good example of that is the semiconductor pivot. Everything was outsourced to, China and Taiwan. And we're like, nah, maybe we should bring it back here. And so I'm interested to see like how that goes. But again, we could talk about that another episode.
Yeah.
So
I'm part of the Montana Manufacturing Extension Center. That network exists here within the state. And
oh, wow. Okay.
I was on their board for quite a few years. So there's a lot of value-added work being done in Montana, including semiconductors.
Oh, that's crazy. Oh, I heard something about that. I'll have to research it after this, but yeah.
Yeah, it's a great organization.
So the fitness business fails, and then you decide to pivot into Red Oxx, but the Red Oxx pivot wasn't always smooth.
No, we're talking pre-internet days. So we're talking pre-digital camera. Okay. So you would go into the studio, shoot a photo, have it drum scanned, which is highly, expensive. And then it would be created to do a print. Boy, it's a while ago. And so you lay out these catalogs and you have to print a lot of copies to make the cost per catalog go down.
Yeah.
We're talking 20, 30,000.
It was a bulk type deal.
Right.
Yeah.
So now you're trying to play like the big dogs, as a small company in Montana. And so I remember our first brochures were pretty rudimentary, but it was paper, right? So if you made one small mistake, like
that's it.
You're eating it, right?
Yeah.
So you learn to get very, in tune with your layout and your graphic design. So it's one of the reasons why I specialize a lot in like branding and all that, because it was so costly to make a mistake. I'd have to go over everything with and then getting the right layout and stuff like that. So,
well, yeah, because today's digital world, if you don't like something, you just change it.
Yeah. You put a web page up
within seconds.
Yeah. You could change it 8 times an hour, until you get it the way you want it.
So what was the failure that you think was one of the bigger ones when you started Red Oxx?
So as we moved from the fitness industry into the quote, hand carry personal items, bags, luggage, gun cases, I failed to realize what I needed to do, the direct mail advertising and the scale of it. But lo and behold, right about that time, the internet comes along and I had this aha moment. I'm like, look at this, this thing can go from Billings, Montana to Paris.
You weren't like one of those that, was like, hey, the internet's just a fad.
No,
you were like, this is game changing. I mean, clearly it is. And it was. Yeah.
And I'm an idiot. I should have bought every .com I possibly could.
Dude, I feel like everybody who sees like, Microsoft, Apple, all those tech companies that started out as like nothing. We're like, man, shit, imagine just buying like one piece of those stock, like just one share.
Oh, I could have bought housecleaning.com. I could have bought
that too. Yeah. The domains.
The domain Coca-Cola was available. I researched, I was literally online. I mean, you wouldn't believe the brand names that were available. I could have bought them all.
That's crazy.
And so I get in there, I get going on the website, and we kind of bet the farm money, because back in those days, pages were hand coded.
Yeah.
They were very expensive. And so, I think it was before 2000. So late 90s, I put a lot of money into the internet, and it didn't work.
It didn't work?
Oh no.
So what was it that just, what did you sink your money into?
Just graphic design, layout, coding, e-commerce, and it didn't, we launched it and it didn't do anything, didn't sell anything. Was
this a product line or just like a catalog or an online catalog? Is that what that was?
It was our, what you see now.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And it didn't take.
No, because people didn't trust the internet back then.
There was no e-commerce going on.
Correct. This is before 2000.
Yeah.
And so people, you spend, I think at the time it was $70,000, $80,000,
wow,
before 2000. So version 1.0 of Red Oxx, total flop.
Because it was on the internet pre-e-commerce days.
Right. It was e-commerce enabled, but it just didn't. Nobody would buy anything online.
Damn.
And so I had one of those coming to Jesus meetings with my business partner, and he looked me in the eye. He says, "Make it fucking work." And I'm like, "Oh shit!" And we have one of these kind of like give and take relationships. I'm allowed to take as much as possible, and he'll give as much as possible. But if I don't deliver,
it's not copacetic.
Yeah. So I just doubled down. Right. I read everything there was to read, which there wasn't much. Right. And
no, I mean, this is the early days. There isn't literature on how to do any of this shit.
Yeah. People vaguely understood what search engine, how they worked. And we used to have a Google Mini on our website. This is the version 2.0. So version 1.0 dies a quick death. I believe within 12 months I have to pull the plug on it and start over.
Was there a I mean, if you don't have to share if you don't want to, but was there a dollar amount that you're like, I spent way too much on this shit?
Not really.
Okay.
I needed to make it work. I knew that was the future. Like I wholeheartedly believed it was the future. But sometimes
not yet.
Yeah, that's my problem. Sometimes I'm 10 years ahead of myself or 10 years ahead of the market, and it's just like, And at the time I didn't realize I was 10 years ahead. I'm just like, this is going to be it. It's going to work.
Yeah, but it wasn't.
But it wasn't. And so then version 2.0 started to work. And
what year was this around?
Probably 97, 98.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so that's when we, at the time, believe it or not, by 2001 or 2002, we were one of the top 500 e-commerce merchants in America, dollar-wise.
That's insane.
We topped $1 million.
Insane.
And
in Little Billings, Montana.
Right.
Yeah.
And companies that resisted the online thing, that didn't believe in it, big brands that had, they're waiting for us to, lead the bleeding edge.
Yeah.
And then just like, we'll be along to, come get ours.
I remember the hesitation. I was high school, transitioning to college at the time, but there were people who were convinced they're like, nothing's going online. Like, I think when Amazon came out too, they were like, no, I'm not going to buy that shit from,
right.
And now look at how Amazon operates.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, I think in that same sense, you were ahead of it, but it just didn't occur at that moment. Damn.
Absolutely. Yeah. It was, so that was version 2. And then, it just started to go. And then of course, like 9/11 hits and the whole thing kind of shuts down.
Yeah.
And then we work our way through that. And, at the time too, I would always pick up like other business, whether it was private labeling, some other manufacturing for people, OEM type work, in different industries. It just, we do some stuff with mining and railroad and electrical companies, utility companies buy things and soft goods.
And so, I mean, I love hearing this story just because it's, I think people look at businesses like yours and they think, he was born, he came out of his mama, and here was Red Oxx. You know what I mean? Like, I think people think like they don't see the road. They don't see the huge ass bumps that you had to do, to get over to get here, the hurdles you had to go over, the hills you had to climb. No one sees that shit.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. If you're going to work for yourself, you're going to work.
Yeah.
And I've read a lot of books and done a lot of windshield time getting to shows and failed. Like I went to this show and I think it was in Bismarck, North Dakota, and I didn't sell anything.
Bismarck, North Dakota.
So I drive out there, the Dakota Deer Classic, right?
Yeah.
So I didn't even have a truck that would make it out of town. So my doctor friend, we loaded up his Dodge and took some bags. This is when the bag thing was really starting to kind of like become what I wanted to do. So I started switching gears and said, we're going to sell these bags instead of this fitness stuff. So I said, there's a show in North Dakota. So we drive over there in the middle of winter and we spend a weekend there. I spend, money on hotels and stuff. And I'm just like, nobody bought anything. And I'm like, oh man,
That's a huge disappointment.
Yeah. And
even if like one bag sold, you'd be like, hey, that was a success.
Right. And so a guy walks over just about at the time we're closing up and he goes, you're wasting your time here. I'm like, yeah. And he hands me a business card and he tells me about another show where there's more opportunity to sell. and it was a hunting show called Safari Club International. And next thing you know, I went to that show, and in 4 days, I sold almost a half a year's worth of production.
Damn. You were just in the wrong market? Is that what it was?
Yeah, just the wrong market. And this guy happened to wander through it. It'd be like going to a gun show and being like, seeing a really great product and being like, what are you doing here at the local gun show? You need to be at the big time. And
Damn.
And I took another risk. I went down to Reno and, as I say, put it all on the credit card and, rolled the dice. And I came back with so many orders. My business partner's like, what's wrong with you? I'm like, dude, I've seen our future, and we're going to be good.
Wow.
And then I started doing other shows. I did the International Sheep Hunting Show, shows in Dallas. And these are direct-to-consumer shows, not wholesale shows, because the market's changed, right? So the days of going you were talking about the biannual market for the
outdoor retailer.
Retailer, right? That's not a market I've ever been interested in, like selling to stores again, because I saw where that
a lot of it is big box stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Or if it's selling to
or chains or franchises.
Franchises,
like that.
right? And I'm just like, you know what? I've been down that road.
Yeah.
I failed at that. So unless I was going to move our production to China and play that whole game and every year, whatever, I just can't do it.
Yeah. So I want to highlight though, and this is the thing about Red Oxx, you manufacture 100% of your bags here.
Yes.
In Montana. So you are truly an American-made company. Everything's assembled here. You hire local workers.
Sourcing in America, which has gotten tough. So basically I end up sourcing from military suppliers who are berry compliant.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense given, I guess, the material that you have.
Yeah.
So.
And my background, right? I'm familiar with nylons.
Yeah.
I'm not a leather worker or anything like that.
Cool. So, I mean, I got to ask because it's easy to look at a lot of the failures that you've overcome. And there were points where you could have just said, fuck it. Like, I'm going to get an 8 to 5. And this is not to like promote entrepreneurial activities. Like it really is about like overcoming fear and failure. Like what was driving you to go, you know what? I can give up, but I'm not going to.
I just couldn't picture myself working for anybody. I spent 4 years in the Marine Corps, and it's about the longest job I ever had in my life. And I chafed at that. I somehow made corporal. I don't know how, what they were thinking when they, promoted me, but I just
felt bad for you.
Here you go. Yeah. Stick around. And, I just couldn't do it. It was one of those things where I've always been entrepreneurial. I've always wanted to do my own thing. And so you'll work harder to achieve your dreams.
Yeah.
I love making stuff. It's a sickness. I spend my spare time building stuff, and if I'm not doing that, I'm working on one of the buildings or working on the property downtown, or working on improving our factory in some way, the process. And so it just fascinates me, the whole like put it together thing.
Well, and that was the first part of the episode where I asked you if you were successful, and you said not yet.
Right.
That's it. And then that's the reason why, is because you're continuously working on it.
Yeah, you're never done.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, what are you going to do? What's your exit strategy? And I have to say, toes up. Like everybody else.
Yeah. I might survive. I might not. We'll see.
Yeah.
So I'm really curious, because there are people out there who don't have the ability to just try like that, or they do fear failure. I mean, there's a lot of individuals who are like, you know what, I'm not even going to attempt this.
Sure. Because
I know I'll fail. And so what advice do you have for those people?
Fail fast, fail cheap.
Fail fast, fail cheap.
I stole that from somebody. I heard it at a speaker.
You're not even going to coin it. You're like, no, it's someone else's.
Someone else's, but it's great. It's a mantra that I don't, as a holistically adopt to, but on a micro level within a product line, I can see it. Like, okay, great. Let's make a coffee cup wrap, and blah blah blah. And if it flops, I'm okay. I can abide by that.
Yeah.
But as the brand in total, that's not a position I want to back away from.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people maybe just need to or want to understand that, you can attempt anything, and there's a good chance that it's just going to fail, and it's becoming okay with that.
Well, like, the whole Thomas Edison thing, right? The whole light bulb.
Was he like, I just discovered 10,000 ways not to make a light bulb.
Right.
Yeah. And that's exactly it.
Yeah.
Cool.
And then perfectionism is a real curse for people that have fear. And so if you've got a perfectionist in your midst, or you're a perfectionist, then they have a fear of like failing to be perfect.
Yeah.
And
Like
so
if I don't do it exactly right, I'm not even going to attempt it.
right.
Yeah.
So that's what stops a lot of people. And there's a great artist I found online. I've been watching some of his YouTube movies. Tom Sachs. He's out of New York City, and his videos are amazing because they just kind of like, they're not perfect. Like he just makes stuff, and like it's got like a screw gun and a glue gun and a can of spray paint, and he's got stuff in the Guggenheim. Right? That's
insane.
And
it's just like scraps he found around his like apartment or something.
Right. He's got this little studio in New York City, and so I thought there's a guy I can kind of get behind. You know, it's like he built like full size models of things like a lunar lander, but he made it out of plywood and spray paint because he wanted one.
Yeah.
You know? And it's a work of art. Like the doors open, the drawers open, the little windows in everywhere.
And he is. I think someone like that is definitely reshaping the way that we see art and materials in general too. So that's cool.
Anything can be art. Yeah. It's funny because it's like after building everything I did down at the events lawn, I'm just kind of like, hey, you know, if I see something, I will make it into something.
Well, that's what I mean. You know, when you price art and people ask about that, and you know, we're going on a rabbit hole here, but it for sure is subjective, and so it's how you view it, and so it's not like, I mean, almost is like a one man's trash, another man's treasure kind of situation where like, I could look at something and be like, that looks like shit. And then you could walk up and be like, dude, that's beautiful.
Yeah. Well, people do that to our product. Not everybody loves our stuff, right? And they're like, well, it's too linear. It's too basic. It's too minimalist. It's too. It's too strong.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, you're not our customer.
Yeah.
But there are thousands of people who are. And so that's another good piece of advice for people that are looking to do something. Just because they get some negative input from some people, it's like, you know, could ask me like, well, what do you think of this music? And I'd say, well, you know, this music is West African, you know, guitar music. I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
You want to see somebody go nuts? I'll play that stuff on the stereo while we're going down the road. My business partner will punch me in the face. So
he's not a small dude either.
Yeah, no, he's a big guy.
No.
So he can clap you a good one. It's like, so some people love certain things. They have an ear for it, let's say. And so it's like, when you're creating a company or a brand per se, I know a lot about branding, so it's like singing a song. Not everybody likes your West African guitar music, but enough people will. So you don't have to be everything to everybody, you know.
Yeah, and you're not supposed to.
Right.
Damn, some truth bombs there.
Yeah, man.
I love it. Thank you for coming on. I mean, this was just a delight. I've always followed what you do. I've always loved Red Oxx in general. I think when I first moved here, you guys had something going on, and I won this little Red Oxx, like those little canvas things that you can like set your keys in.
The travel basket.
Travel basket. I won those like forever ago, and I was like, dude, this is cool. I was like, I'm hooked by that little stupid travel basket that like, you're like, how?
Well, the story behind that is I hate waste. And so it's part of our lean process. When you're stacking material, you end up with these little voids in the pattern.
Yeah.
So you're cutting a safari bag out, and you end up with the little hole there. And what can we make out of that? And so that was where those things came from.
Ingenious.
And we don't, we try not to have. I mean, at the end of the week or whenever they come get the garbage, I pride myself on not having an overflowing dumpster.
Damn. That's awesome. I love that, and especially nowadays. Like,
yeah.
Cool.
We were green before it was cool, man.
Thank you for being here. It's like I said, it's been a pleasure. I wish you obviously the best of luck. And, if you're looking 10 years forward, I'm interested to see what that looks like. And so maybe we'll have to have you back on and talk about what your 10-year vision is.
I'll come in here and take over the studio. I like this place.
It's right. It's nice.
The new Rock 31.